Your life changes the moment you make a new, congruent, and committed decision. Right now, in this very moment, of those closest to us. Some people lift you higher. They inspire you to grow, to reach for your dreams, to become the best version of yourself. But others pull you down into the mud of negativity, doubt, and limitation. They cast shadows over your brightest ideas and plant seeds of fear in your garden of possibility. You weren't born to live a limited life. You weren't meant to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You were born to shine, to express your unique gifts, and to fulfill your highest potential. But to do that, you must make some tough choices about who deserves a place in your inner circle. This isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about understanding a simple truth. Your time and energy are your most precious resources. How you invest them determines the quality of your life. Just as you wouldn't put your money into a failing business, you shouldn't invest your precious life energy into relationships that consistently diminish you. Today, I'm going to talk about 7 types of people you need to remove from your life immediately if you want to grow, to thrive, and to experience the fullness of what this magnificent life has to offer. Now, this might not be easy to hear. Some of these people might be longtime friends, family members, or colleagues. You might feel guilty about the idea of distancing yourself from them, but remember this: you cannot become who you're meant to be while constantly exposing yourself to influences that keep you tied to who you've always been. Growth requires space. Transformation demands new influences. Your greatest life is waiting on the other side of these difficult but necessary decisions. So let's begin this journey together with honesty, with courage, and with a commitment to creating a life that truly reflects your highest values and deepest aspirations. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will happen if you stay committed to honoring yourself and your path. The first type of person you need to remove from your life is the chronic complainer. You know exactly who I'm talking about. These are the people who find something negative in every situation. No matter what's happening, they have a problem with it. Beautiful sunny day? It's too hot. Rainy day? This weather is terrible. New opportunity? It probably won't work out anyway. Chronic complainers have developed a habit of seeing life through a lens of dissatisfaction. They've programmed their minds to automatically find what's wrong rather than what's right. And here's what you need to understand. This isn't just annoying, it's contagious. When you regularly expose yourself to this kind of negative thinking, your own mind begins to adopt the same patterns. You start noticing problems more quickly than possibilities. You begin expecting things to go wrong. Your brain gets rewired for pessimism rather than optimism. This happens because of how our brains work. We have something called mirror neurons that cause us to unconsciously mimic the emotional states of those around us. It's a biological mechanism that evolved to help us connect with our tribe. But in today's world, it means that spending time with chronic complainers literally changes your brain chemistry. I once worked with a woman named Sarah who couldn't figure out why she felt so drained and negative all the time. She was naturally optimistic, but lately everything seemed to be going wrong in her life. When we looked deeper, we discovered that her lunch partner at work was a chronic complainer who spent their entire hour together listing all the problems in her life, criticizing their coworkers, and predicting disaster for the company. Sarah made a simple change. She started eating lunch with different colleagues, or sometimes just taking a peaceful walk alone. Within 2 weeks, her natural optimism returned, her energy levels increased, she started seeing opportunities again instead of obstacles, all from this one change in who she exposed herself to during that daily lunch hour. Now you might be thinking, but shouldn't I help these people become more positive? That's a generous thought. But here's the truth, chronic complainers aren't looking for solutions. When you offer them a positive perspective, they'll immediately shoot it down and often become defensive. They're invested in their problems because complaining gives them attention, a sense of identity, and a way to avoid taking responsibility for their lives. You can recognize chronic complainers by how you feel after spending time with them. If you consistently feel heavy, drained, or negative after your interactions, pay attention to that. Your body is telling you something important. These feelings are signs that this person is depleting your energy rather than enhancing it. The second type of person you need to remove from your life is the energy vampire. Energy vampires are different from complainers in an important way. While complainers are overtly negative, energy vampires can sometimes appear positive or even helpful on the surface. What defines them is how they make you feel, completely drained. Energy vampires need constant attention and emotional support, but they never seem to have any to give in return. The relationship is fundamentally unbalanced. They have endless problems that need your immediate attention. They create constant drama that you're expected to help resolve. They make excessive demands on your time, your emotions, and your resources. I remember talking with Michael, a talented artist who couldn't understand why he never had the energy to work on his own creations. As we discussed his daily routine, he mentioned a friend who called him multiple times every day with various crises. This friend needed Michael's advice on everything from what to wear to major life decisions. Michael felt obligated to help because this person had been in his life for years. But when I asked him a simple question, after these conversations, do you feel energized or depleted? His answer was immediate, completely depleted, like someone pulled my plug. That's the telltale sign of an energy vampire. They tap into your resources without replenishing them. They take and take and take, leaving you empty. What makes these relationships particularly difficult to end is that energy vampires are often skilled at making you feel responsible for their bewilderment. They might say things like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." These statements create emotional hooks that keep you engaged even as they drain you dry. But here's what you need to remember. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you're constantly giving your energy to someone who never replenishes it, eventually you'll have nothing left for yourself or for the people who genuinely support and nourish you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, both for yourself and ultimately for them, is to step back and allow them to develop their own resources. Your constant rescue missions aren't really helping them grow, they're enabling dependency. The third type of person you need to remove from your life is the judgmental critic. These are the people who always seem to have an opinion about what you're doing wrong. No achievement is quite good enough. No decision goes unquestioned. No dream is without their assessment of all the ways it might fail. Judgmental critics often disguise their behavior as just trying to help or keeping you grounded. But there's a world of difference between constructive feedback given with love and constant criticism that undermines your confidence. True feedback has several important qualities. It's specific rather than general. It focuses on behavior rather than character. It's requested rather than imposed. And most importantly, it's designed to help you grow rather than to make you doubt yourself. Critics don't operate this way. Their comments often attack who you are rather than what you're doing. They make sweeping generalizations like, "You always mess things up," or "You never think things through." And they offer their unwanted opinions even when you haven't asked for input. The damage these people do goes far beyond momentary hurt feelings. When you're constantly exposed to criticism, you begin to internalize that critical voice. It becomes the soundtrack in your own mind, questioning your every move and undermining your confidence before you even begin. I worked with a brilliant young entrepreneur named James, who had an amazing business idea, but couldn't seem to take the necessary steps to launch it. As we explored what was holding him back, he revealed that whenever he shared his ideas with his father, he was met with a detailed analysis of everything that could go wrong. His father wasn't being malicious. He genuinely believed he was helping his son be realistic. But the effect was that James had developed an inner critic that sounded exactly like his father. Before taking any action, he would hear his father's voice listing all the potential failures, and it paralyzed him. We worked on creating some distance from this relationship. While James developed his own inner voice, he limited conversations with his father about his business and instead sought mentorship from established entrepreneurs who could provide constructive guidance. The result? Within 6 months, his business was up and running, exceeding even his own expectations. Remember this: criticism tears down, feedback builds up. The people worthy of your inner circle are those who can see your blind spots and lovingly help you address them, not those who consistently make you feel inadequate or flawed. The fourth type of person you need to remove from your life is the constant victim. These individuals believe that life is happening to them rather than for them. They see themselves as powerless pawns in a game rigged against them. Nothing is ever their fault or their responsibility. It's always someone else's doing. What makes constant victims particularly toxic is how they respond to life's inevitable challenges. Instead of asking, "What can I learn from this?" or "How can I address this situation?" they ask, "Who can I blame for this?" or "Why does this always happen to me?" This victim mentality is more than just annoying, it's contagious. When you spend significant time with people who refuse to take responsibility for their lives, you begin to adopt the same outlook. You start seeing yourself as powerless rather than powerful. You begin noticing all the ways you've been wronged, rather than all the ways you can right your path. I once counseled a woman named Lisa, whose friend of 20 years was a textbook victim. Every conversation revolved around how people had mistreated her, how the world was unfair, and how nothing was her fault. Lisa had developed a habit of her own. Whenever something went wrong in her life, her first thought wasn't, "How can I fix this?" but "Who did this to me?" When Lisa began to create some distance from this friendship and surround herself with people who took ownership of their lives, her whole perspective shifted. She started seeing challenges as opportunities to grow, rather than evidence that the world was against her. Her language changed from "I can't because" to "How can I?" The constant victim will always have a reason why they can't move forward, can't be happy, can't succeed. And as long as you keep them close, they'll offer you the same excuses for your own life. They'll validate your reasons for staying stuck because it justifies their own stagnation. But you weren't born to stay stuck. You were born to evolve, to grow, to overcome. And that requires taking full responsibility for your life, something you cannot do while surrounded by those who refuse to take responsibility for theirs. The fifth type of person you need to remove from your life is the manipulator. Manipulators are masters at using guilt, shame, and obligation to control your behavior. They know exactly which emotional buttons to push to get what they want from you. What makes manipulators particularly dangerous is that they operate below the surface. Unlike the critic who openly tells you what they think is wrong with you, or the complainer who overtly expresses negativity, the manipulator works through subtle emotional tactics that can be hard to identify in the moment. They might use phrases like, "After all I've done for you," to trigger feelings of obligation. Or they might say, "I thought you cared about me," to activate your guilt. They might even resort to the silent treatment, withholding affection or communication until you comply with their wishes. These tactics work because they bypass your rational thinking and go straight to your emotional core. Before you realize what's happening, you find yourself doing things you don't want to do, agreeing to things that don't align with your values, or giving up opportunities that were important to you, all to appease the manipulator. I worked with a talented musician named Robert who couldn't understand why he repeatedly turned down promising opportunities. Through our conversations, we discovered that his longtime girlfriend would become cold and distant whenever he mentioned these opportunities. She never directly told him not to pursue them, but her emotional withdrawal was enough to make him choose the relationship over his career time and time again. Once Robert recognized this pattern of manipulation, he was able to have an honest conversation with his girlfriend about it. Unfortunately, she wasn't willing to change her behavior, and Robert ultimately made the difficult decision to end the relationship. Within a year, his career had flourished in ways he'd never imagined possible. Manipulators keep you small by making you feel responsible for their emotions. They create invisible chains that limit your movement through life, and as long as you allow them close access to your emotional controls, you'll never be truly free to make choices based on your own desires and values. Remember this: healthy relationships expand your life. They don't contract it. The people who truly care about you want to see you soar, even if your flight path takes you away from them sometimes. The sixth type of person you need to remove from your life is the promise breaker. These are the people who consistently say one thing and do another. They make commitments they don't keep. They create expectations they don't fulfill. They offer support that never materializes. Promise breakers aren't necessarily malicious. Often they genuinely intend to follow through at the moment they make a promise, but they lack the integrity, the discipline, or the respect for others that would ensure they actually keep their word. The damage these people do goes beyond the practical inconvenience of their unreliability. The deeper harm is to your ability to trust not just them, but eventually everyone. After repeated experiences with promise breakers, you begin to expect disappointment. You start to believe that people can't be counted on. You develop a protective cynicism that keeps you from fully engaging in relationships. I once worked with a business owner named David who had become so distrustful that he was micromanaging his entire staff, creating bottlenecks and burnout throughout his company. When we explored the roots of this behavior, we discovered that his first business partner had repeatedly broken promises about financial contributions, work commitments, and strategic decisions, eventually causing their joint venture to fail. David had never processed this betrayal. Instead, he had unconsciously decided that no one could be trusted to keep their word. This assumption was now threatening his current business, as talented employees were leaving due to his inability to delegate and trust. Through our work together, David began to recognize that his former partner's behavior wasn't universal. He started to distinguish between people who demonstrated integrity and those who didn't. He developed systems to test reliability in small ways before extending greater trust. Gradually, he built a team of people who kept their promises, and his business flourished. Promise breakers teach you to expect disappointment. They train you to doubt others' words. They set you up for a life of suspicion rather than trust. And without trust, you cannot build meaningful relationships, successful businesses, or fulfilling collaborations. People who honor their word might occasionally have to say no, or I can't right now, or I made a mistake. These honest responses are far more valuable than empty promises. Surround yourself with people whose yes means yes and whose no means no, and you'll build a foundation of trust that supports everything else in your life. The seventh and final type of person you need to remove from your life is the jealous competitor. These are the people who can't genuinely celebrate your successes because they're too busy comparing your achievements to their own. Jealous competitors might fake enthusiasm for your good news, but there's always an undercurrent of resentment. They might respond to your success with phrases like, "You're so lucky," dismissing your hard work. Or, "That's great, but..." Or they might quickly change the subject to their own related accomplishment. What makes these relationships particularly toxic is how they train you to hide your light. After enough lukewarm or negative responses to your good news, you start sharing less. You downplay your achievements. You might even begin sabotaging your own success to maintain the relationship. I remember talking with Jennifer, a talented writer who found herself procrastinating every time she got close to finishing her novel. As we explored what was happening, she realized that her best friend, also an aspiring writer who hadn't made much progress on her own book, would become distant and critical whenever Jennifer shared her writing milestone. To preserve the friendship, Jennifer had unconsciously started ensuring she didn't get too far ahead. Once she recognized this pattern, she was able to have an honest conversation with her friend. They agreed to take a break from discussing their writing with each other and instead find separate supportive communities for their creative work. Freed from this unconscious restraint, Jennifer completed her novel within months and found a publisher shortly thereafter. Meanwhile, her friend found a writing group that matched her slower pace and felt less threatened as a result. True friends amplify your achievements, not diminish them. They find inspiration in your success rather than resentment. They use your growth as evidence of what's possible rather than as a painful reminder of their own perceived inadequacies. But jealous competitors can only see your success through the lens of what it means about them. In their zero-sum worldview, your gain must somehow be their loss. This fundamentally flawed perspective creates an environment where neither of you can truly thrive. Now that we've identified these 7 toxic influences, I want to talk about how to disconnect from them with compassion and integrity. Because this isn't about blaming or vilifying these people. It's about making healthy choices for your own billing health. First, recognize that most negative behavior comes from pain. The complainer, the energy vampire, the critic, the victim, the manipulator, the promise breaker, the jealous competitor. All of these patterns typically stem from unhealed wounds, limiting beliefs, or coping mechanisms developed in response to difficult circumstances. This understanding doesn't mean you need to keep these people close. You can have compassion for someone's pain while still creating healthy boundaries. In fact, enabling destructive patterns by remaining available to them isn't truly compassionate. It's merely comfortable. Second, consider whether a direct conversation might help transform the relationship. Sometimes people aren't aware of how their behavior affects others. An honest, non-accusatory discussion that focuses on your experience rather than their flaws might create an opening for positive change. For example, instead of saying, "You're such a negative person," you might say, "I've noticed that our conversations often focus on problems rather than solutions, and afterward I feel drained rather than uplifted." This approach gives the other person information about the impact of their behavior without attacking their character. If you decide to have such a conversation, be prepared for various responses. Some people will be receptive and grateful for the feedback. Others might become defensive or deny there's any issue. Still others might initially agree, but show no lasting change in behavior. Let these responses guide your next steps. If someone shows genuine interest in creating a healthier dynamic, you might choose to maintain the relationship while the new patterns establish themselves. But if they dismiss your concerns or show only temporary improvement before reverting to old behaviors, that's valuable information about whether this relationship can truly support your growth. Third, remember that creating distance doesn't have to be dramatic or absolute. Sometimes the wisest approach is to gradually reduce contact rather than announcing a complete break. You might become less available for one-on-one interactions while still maintaining cordial contact in group settings. You might extend the time between get-togethers or limit conversations to certain topics. This gradual approach often works well with family members or long-standing friendships where a complete separation might create additional complications. It allows the natural evolution of the relationship without unnecessary conflict. Finally, as you create space by removing these toxic influences, be intentional about filling that space with positive ones. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you don't consciously choose new relationships and influences, you might find yourself drifting back to familiar but unhealthy connections simply because they're available. Seek out people who embody the qualities you want to develop in yourself. Look for those who take responsibility for their lives, who maintain healthy boundaries, who celebrate your successes as enthusiastically as their own, who offer criticism only when it's truly helpful and requested, who keep their promises, and who leave you feeling energized rather than depleted. As you make these changes, you might experience some guilt or doubt. You might wonder if you're being too selfish or harsh, but remember this: creating healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your behavior and growth, and ultimately, it's better for everyone involved. You model healthy relationship patterns. You stop enabling destructive behaviors. You create space for genuine connections based on mutual respect and support. Your life is too precious to spend it surrounded by people who diminish rather than enhance it. You deserve relationships that reflect your value, that honor your path, that contribute to your growth rather than impede it. So let me leave you with this thought. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your relationships. Not the quantity, the quality. A few deep, supportive connections will enrich your life far more than dozens of depleting ones. Today, right now, you have the power to begin transforming your life by changing who you allow into your inner circle. This isn't about becoming isolated or judgmental. It's about being intentional with your most precious resource, your life energy. Make the decision today to gradually disconnect from those who consistently diminish you. Create space for new connections that reflect who you're becoming rather than who you've been. Have the courage to honor your own needs and boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. Remember that every time you say no to relationships that drain you, you're saying yes to relationships that fulfill you. Every time you create a boundary that protects your energy, you're creating capacity for experiences that enhance it. This process isn't always easy, but it is always worthwhile, because on the other side of these difficult but necessary decisions is a life of greater peace, purpose, and possibility. A life where you're surrounded by people who celebrate your light rather than diminish it. A life where your relationships accelerate your growth rather than impede it. That life is available to you. It begins with a decision you can make right now. Choose to honor yourself by carefully curating the influences in your life. Choose to surround yourself with people who bring out your best rather than your worst. Choose to create connections based on mutual growth and support rather than dependency and depletion. The power is yours. The time is now. Your greatest life is waiting.